Welcome to Compassion Speaks. Today is a very special episode for me. Here on this show, we highlight nonprofits in the community that do excellent work, and we want to give voice to them so that way you, our viewers, are able to see all the wonderful work that these organizations do and get involved and support them to help to support our local community. So today, I have with me a very special guest. Her name is Kisa Corcoran, and she is the new Executive Director for the White Mountain Safe House. And I just want to welcome you so much for coming on the show today, Kisa.
Thank you, Stephanie.
And Kisa is stepping in and doing such fabulous work already. I'm really excited to hear about all the different things that are in motion as you take on this endeavor and move forward with the Safe House. So I want to kind of just jump into a little bit about you. You're new to this community, new to the Safe House as well, but can you tell us a little bit about yourself and what your background is, what your passions are?
Well, thank you, Stephanie. And I am filling your shoes, actually, since you just stepped out of that position. And it's really been an honor to see the work that you've done here in the community. And I guess if I were to say what my background is, first of all, I guess it covers 25 years of work in domestic violence and sexual violence services over, since I was a much younger woman, actually. And somebody asked me recently, whatever made you interested in doing this work? Because it is hard work. And I recalled from my childhood waking up one morning, and in our living room there were 3 people sleeping on our floor with blankets and pillows. And I went out to the kitchen and asked my mom what was going on, and she said, well, and I won't say the name, but her friend and her daughters had come to spend the night because she'd been in a domestic violence situation the night before. And so what I learned is that you give people a place to sleep. You make sure they're warm and comfortable, and you feed them, and then you listen. Yeah. So that's really probably the first understanding I ever had about what you do when domestic violence is happening.
Wonderful. What an amazing story to really have that so integrated just in your family unit, as a child, to have that empathetic and supportive direction and viewpoint of how to work with individuals, whether they're close to you, their family, their friends, or they're strangers off the street, on how to get out of those situations safely. So good for your mom for providing that. Such needed support. And this was in a time where shelters didn't exist. There were no options. There were no places to go. You turned to family and friends, and hopefully you had someone like your mom that was willing to say, come on, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, come on, it's okay, you can sleep on our floor, you know. Wonderful. So let's fast forward a little bit. This is how you experience it as a child. Now, how do you experience it as an adult? What got you into this field and kind of drove that passion to create this 25-year-long history that you have now in this field?
Well, there are a number of things, but I think the thing that really impacted me was I was we had quarter systems in college back then. I was in a quarter, and during that quarter I carried my books in my arms. The very top book was about rape, and so that was in big letters as I was carrying my books around college campus. And every place I went, it invited somebody to tell a story. And the first woman who told me her story, and I wasn't asking for stories at that point, but she tapped at that book and she said, my granddaddy was a dirty old man. And I sat down and I listened, and I skipped classes to listen to her because it was a long story. By the end of that quarter, I made a list after all the finals were done, and I made a list of 21 women I knew who had been in sexual violence, many of whom had told me their story in that last quarter. And then a family member called me and said, it happened to me too. And so that was when I was sort of lit on fire, because I knew almost none of those women reached out. And that began the passion. My first job, unpaid, was 4 years of volunteer work at a crisis line. And over the years, I really understood that it took something different other than even counseling, which I was very fond of and supported. It took somebody being a friend to that woman, not an expert, but somebody that could stand shoulder to shoulder with her and say, I'm listening, tell me more.
That support system is, to this day, one of the most necessary pieces of the puzzle to really be able to move forward and in a positive direction, you know, to help to build that person back up with their sense of self-worth and their sense of feeling valued by others as well. And it's something that you can't get from necessarily professional services, you know, while they serve a very important function and purpose. There's a lot that's missing in between the lines there that someone can really benefit from to really, again, help to build them up to be the person that they are meant to be, you know?
Yes, very well put. I agree with you.
Thank you. So that kind of was the beginning stages of you getting involved in this movement, and a lot of people refer to the movement to end domestic and sexual violence in the world. So it's very much a part of one's life once you get involved, which again, you know, as I left the Safe House, my passion for assisting survivors will never diminish, because that passion is always, once it's ignited, it never goes away.
You're so right.
But you've grown with that, and so from that crisis line that you volunteered at for 4 years, it went on from there to work at different programs. So maybe we can touch on the program that you were most recently involved with and what kind of program that was.
Sure. I worked for 11 years most recently before coming here at Gila River Indian Community. And when I got there in 2003, there was one position. And we had a very high violent crime rate on the reservation community. And I quickly knew I couldn't do it by myself. Because of networking and talking with people and serving family members of tribal council members or a community manager, I was able to talk to them one-on-one and say, we need so much more here. And so over that 11 years, I was able to grow the program from 1 position to 9 to do outreach. At some point, I was able to, for 3 years I worked at getting the attention of people who make decisions in the tribe to say, we've got to put up a shelter, because I'm taking women way far away from their home to help them get away. And so for 6 years we worked and we built a shelter. And so when I left the community, we had a number of people working at the shelter, 9 of them working in my little program, and a whole lot bigger response.
It's amazing. It's amazing to see an obvious need there, and then to work until that need is provided for, you know. And that's the history of the Safe House. Even as we started as there we go again. I said we,
and you're we.
And we are. We're still we. But the Safe House started as a safe home network, which involved local families opening up their homes to provide temporary housing for individuals and families that were immediately homeless due to DV. But then they would ultimately be sent down to the valley to where the actual shelters were. So in 1990 is whenever a shelter program was created up here in the White Mountains, now known as the White Mountain Safe House. But in being able to provide for that local community without having to remove that person from where their home is, where their family is, where their support is so detrimental to their success in being able to ultimately leave that situation.
Yes.
So good, that's wonderful to hear about. And you and I have had so many different conversations about it, but I'm just always so amazed to hear about your involvement and your throughout the history of your involvement with this movement and all of the wonderful things that you've done for those communities, and what I know you'll also do for this community here in the White Mountains.
Well, thank you.
Of course. So so now you're here. I know you were expecting to come and kick your feet up in the White Mountains.
Right.
And I still hope you can do that. I'll call you and say, hey, do you want to come kick up your feet with me today?
I look forward.
But so you've got a lot on your plate with the Safe House, and still learning a lot. But I wanted to talk with our viewers today as well about kind of domestic violence at its core. You know, some of the primary definitions, because a lot of people still have misconceptions or misunderstandings, as you well know. So being able to educate others so that way they can not only maybe help themselves, but family and friends in the future is so important.
Sure.
So let's talk about that.
Okay.
Let's maybe just break it down for domestic violence in general. What does that look like? What does domestic violence consist of?
Sure. Well, and one of the most well-known ideas about what domestic violence is that it involves people being assaulted. And that definitely is true. I think what's really important to understand about it is that there's a whole system of behaviors, or a pattern of behaviors that occur in a home where that's happening. And it involves emotional abuse, name calling, control, somebody telling you where you can go and when you have to come back and what you can wear. Those are all abuses of control and power in a relationship. And those aren't things you can get arrested for. So those things don't necessarily come to anybody's attention. But we are used to hearing about, knowing that bruises are involved and broken bones and injury. But there are many parts of it. You know, using the children against the other spouse to control somebody's behaviors. Those are all more subtle things. They're a part of an overall pattern of behaviors meant to control.
Right.
And to have power over.
Because that's what domestic violence is really centered around. You know, it's not an anger issue. It's not, I lost my temper. It's a systematic pattern, as you said, that is integrated into all different parts of that relationship, and not just physically against that other person, but also emotionally and mentally.
Right.
Very well said. I think it's so important to inform the public on that, because a lot of people, as in working in the shelter and working with those who come through our doors, they don't necessarily see those smaller pieces as being part of that big abusive cycle that they were in. So that's part of the mission of the Safe House, is to educate not only the public, but also those who seek the services there.
That's right.
In order to really educate them on being able to identify those abusive characteristics, to ultimately stay away from them and keep themselves safe.
Right. To know that you don't deserve to be treated in a way that makes you afraid or ashamed.
Exactly. That's not what love is.
Right.
So sometimes it's even redefining love with different families and individuals, because domestic violence can be such a generational issue that it can be almost an expectation of what you are ultimately deserving of whenever you grow up to be an adult.
That's right.
And what kind of love you expect to get in return from that other partner. So one thing too I want to touch on really briefly too is that domestic violence isn't necessarily just in a man and woman intimate relationship.
Right.
It can exist in other relationships as well. Let's talk about that a little bit. What are different examples of where domestic violence can exist?
Well, one of the things that I saw a lot more of when I worked in other places was that elders can be abused by their caregiver, whether sometimes it's the spouse, but it can be their children or even their grandchildren. And that is definitely domestic abuse, domestic violence. Some of it is illegal and some of it's, just making somebody afraid,
Right.
Not helping them get to medical attention, things like that. It can happen between siblings. And, I remember a situation where one of the siblings in the house, she was a little bit older, everybody was afraid of her, including her father. And that's definitely a situation where there's domestic violence. Partners, gay and lesbian partners, it happens there as well. It doesn't discriminate because of race or gender orientation or sexual preference. It doesn't discriminate about any of those things. So if any time someone is afraid of someone in their family or someone who they love or have a relationship with, that needs to be looked at.
Yeah. And they need to reach out too, that's,
Yes.
and not necessarily saying that the safe house is where you need to turn to for everybody. But if you don't have a support system, if you don't have family or friends that are willing to help you or that you feel uncomfortable going to, it's an available free resource to be able to utilize at whatever level you feel comfortable with. And that's kind of where I want to segue into now, is that I think most people who hear about the Safe House know that it is a shelter program,
Right.
designated to assist families and individuals that are homeless due to domestic violence. But there's another facet to the organization that we're always trying to get the word out on, and that is helping people non-residentially. So
Right.
they don't necessarily need shelter, but they still might need some help in
Yes.
some different ways. And tell us a little bit about non-residential services and
Sure.
how that can benefit different people in the community who may need that.
Yes. And of course, like you're saying, not everybody needs to go to a shelter to get help. It may be happening in your life and you're fine at home or you're fine at a relative's home. However, you might need help going through the legal system, getting an order of protection. It's what some people call a restraining order. Just talking about what you've experienced. Having somebody to go with you to court or to help you get child support. Just to talk to learn more about it. Telling your story is so important, and so we're there for all of those things. Men and young men are abused, and we're there for them as well.
I'm glad that you touched on that, because a lot of people feel that or have that misconception that domestic violence is only a woman's issue, and that's
Right.
not the case.
Right.
There are I know the Safe House's numbers are growing every year on the number of calls and requests for service by men who are
Yes.
also experiencing domestic violence
right.
in their homes. But there's a sense of what's the word I'm looking for? A stigma
Yeah.
to be a man and to be abused by a woman.
Right.
So in those cases, I know that keeps a lot of people from reaching out because of that stigma.
Yes.
But the Safe House is there 24/7 to
Right.
confidentially provide support
Yes.
to anybody, male or female. So I'm glad that you brought that up,
Right.
that it can very much happen to men as much as
Yes.
women. And I hope that this gets across to the viewers too, because I know what we're always trying to accomplish in this movement
Yes.
is to bring in as much awareness to
Yes.
the community, but also to build kind of like a mini army of people that are, just really marching with this
Yes.
cause to end domestic violence and sexual violence.
Yes.
And it takes the community to be able to do that. The programs that do this job can't do it on their own. We
That's
have to.
so true. And I just got goosebumps when you said that, because what I've discovered in my short time here is how very active this community is. Both police departments are ready to work on things together, and donations that come in. It's like almost every place you go, somebody wants to help. And I've been in different communities doing this work, and I've never seen such a beautiful response from people.
I am always floored by that too, to see everyone that whatever either call into the hotline or that you'd bump into
Yes.
would be, oh, you know, I've got some things, can I bring them by? You know, I've got some sheets, can you use them? Or what about some coats for the kids? It's been amazing to see how the supportive the community is for all the different wonderful organizations that do such important work up here.
That's right.
I don't think it can be duplicated anywhere else. But, so let's touch on that. If somebody wants to get involved and you know, they hear about what it is that the Safe House does, and they get that spark inside of them. I want to help. You know, I want to help those people. I want to help that organization and what they're doing. How can they get involved? What can they do?
Well, we're in the process of developing opportunities for people. And for example, a few weeks back, one of my dear friends from the reservation that I used to work for came up with a friend, and we allowed them to come in, have supper with the women, and we all sat around and talked. The two women shared their story, and that provided an incredible opening for the women who were at the home at the time. In fact, they're still talking about it. Last night, I got an earful. When is Loretta coming back, for example? We would love to have more people bring their knowledge or their skill to the house to work with the women. And you do have to go through the background check and pass all of that. But we would love to have people participating in the house, at the table with the women. And there are the events that you're so familiar with where they can participate. But please, you know, I would hope people would call and say, you know, I can volunteer to help with some carpentry or whatever your skill is.
Right. So. There's always a need, and there's always, we always want to invite more people to get involved in the organization and whatever their skill set is, because there's always a niche that we can help to fill, you know, with whatever it is they have to offer. But I like what you mentioned about you know, having them come and sit down around the table with the ladies. It's so incredibly hard to talk with others that have never worked in this type of field before, because a lot of times they hear about, they think about the most ugly portions of this that do exist, you know, not to say that they don't, but there is such an amazingly rewarding part to that, being a part of that journey with a family, with a woman who is going through the shelter program, and the transformation that they go through from feeling this big to standing proud and beautiful is just amazing to witness and to be a small part of that. So anybody who's interested in volunteering, you can be a small part of that success, even a big part of that success, because you never know how impactful your presence or your story or your presentation of whatever your skill set is can be to an individual. So yes, it's October. It is Domestic Violence Awareness Month next month in October. So it's a perfect opportunity to get involved. You guys have a Domestic Violence Awareness Walk that happens every October. I know your viewers can go to the website to get more information on that, to get involved, but ton of fun last year with the police department, wearing high heels. It's awesome. You can't miss it. Bring your camera, videotape it. I know it's a lot of fun, and I know you'll have a blast with them this year. I know I'll be stopping by to have fun in the festivities.
Great.
And then you guys have every January the Robert Burns Dinner and Auction held up at Honda, and that's the biggest fundraiser of the year for you guys. So I know that there's information on the website for that, for people who may want to buy tickets or sponsor a table or sponsor more than that.
Yes.
The more support, the better for the organization and
Right.
the services that you guys provide. So very good. Well, is there anything else that we can throw in there to kind of wrap things up as we've gone on this journey today together?
Yeah, I would just say, don't be afraid to be interested in what we do just because it's a hard thing that people go through. And you've already touched on how the transformation into coming back into understanding yourself as a worthy person. That's so wonderful to participate in, and I do invite people to join us.
Wonderful. And also to those who may be experiencing that, either in their own personal lives or someone that they know and care about, don't hesitate to call. 24/7, there's an advocate, a trained, experienced advocate on the phone, ready to talk with you and explain how we can help you and offer whatever services that you might be interested in. So don't hesitate to call on that. So
That's great.
wonderful, Kisa. I'm so thrilled that you came here today. I'm so excited for you and for the Safe House, and can't wait to see what wonderful strides you guys make in the community, and look forward to being involved as much as I possibly can as things move forward. And thank you for joining us. Join us next time to hear Compassion Speak.
The White Mountain Safe House is a private, nonprofit program dedicated to providing shelter, care, and advocacy for victims of domestic violence. If you or anyone you know is in need of services, please contact our 24-hour hotline at 928-367-6017. If you would like to support our organization in any way, please visit our website for more information at wmsafehouse.org.